Hello, I'm so glad you're here. This is Gina from McGuire. So I'm always looking for new ways to make my cards kind of stand out, maybe add some dimension, maybe add some shine. Well, today we're going to combine the two. So I'm showing you a really fun way to make your embossing foldered backgrounds stand out, and it makes it look like it glows. Now, I was inspired by Simon Hurley with the technique I'm sharing today. He really knocks this technique out of the park. I'm just showing some variations today and more ways you can use this technique. I will link to Simon's video up here on the top right and at the end of this video if you want to check it out too. Before we get into this glowing technique, let's first talk about embossing folders. I'm using a bunch of 3D embossing folders today. However, I will demonstrate this technique with a traditional 2D embossing folder a bit later in the video. Everybody's embossing folders seem to have a different thickness, so you need to either test it out for yourself on your machine or look at the company's website to see what they recommend as a sandwich. Here I'm testing out this particular 3D embossing folder to figure out what would work best. I found with my Spellbinders and these Simon Says Stamp 3D embossing folders, I use a platform, 2 heavyweight cardstock shims, and then the folder, and that's it. Another thing that I like to do when I use an embossing folder is to get my paper a little moist. You could either wipe a baby wipe over it or just give it a light mist with a spray bottle. This is just water. I like to do a little spray on both sides of the paper. It really doesn't matter how much water you put on. I just put a light amount. That way the paper will kind of flex more and take the shape of the folder even better. Then I run it through my machine. It doesn't matter if you put it through sideways like this or the longer way. I usually do sideways because it's faster, and I like to go back and forth. So I run it through one way and then the other way, and look at this beautiful deep impression. Now that will dry and it'll become nice and smooth colored, and look at that texture. I love this particular folder. Well, today I'm showing you how to take any embossing folder background and add a glowing effect to it. And it's so cool, very easy. And I'm going to show you many different ways to do this technique to get different looks. To create this shine, I chose to use Simon Hurley Lunar Paste. This is a creamy paste that has a lot of color and a lot of metallic shine. You can use it on stencils, you can use a light layer on a piece of cardstock to make it look shimmery, and you can use it for the technique I'm using today. You can add a little water to it and even get a metallic watercolor look with painting. So a little goes a long way, and there's a lot in this jar. If you do not have this particular product, you can try any other metallic creamy paste or gels that you may have. You could try liquid pearls for this, but I'm going to focus on this one because I really like the consistency and the many uses you can get from it. There are 15 colors, I think, right now. I think I only have 14 of them here. I didn't do swatches because here's the thing. If you use these on white cardstock, the color is true to what you see on the jar. I will give you a closer look at the colors here and the names. Really, the colors that I recommend are the colors you would use the most. Here we have Triple Berry, Bee Sting, and Game Over. I love his names. They're really clever. Here we have Roar, Traffic Cone, and Slippery When Wet, which I happen to use quite a bit in today's video. Then there is Shooting Star and Psych, which is another one that I like to use. For greens, we have Later Gator, Fake Plant, and Minty Fresh. And then finally for the blues, which are just so beautiful, we have Tropical Tango, Midnight Snack, and Clear Skies. I'm making mostly holiday cards today, so I'll be sticking with like the greens and the kind of gold colors, even blue for a winter sky. But again, if you're considering trying these out, I would just go for whatever colors you seem to use most when you're creating. And remember, you can always try these techniques with products you may already have. All right, now let's just do a quick demonstration and then we'll get into lots of different ways to do this and lots of cards. I have a panel that I used this embossing folder on just like I demonstrated earlier. And we're going to first just play around with this product. This is Slippery When Wet that has kind of a gold color to it. I like to put a little bit on my glass work surface and kind of spread it out with my finger so I have a thin layer of it. And then I make sure there's not a ton of it on my finger, just a little bit, and then I rub it directly onto the raised area. I keep my finger kind of flat, and I'm doing this very lightly. And that way the raised area will catch that product and give it this amazing shiny glow. It's actually so metallic it almost looks like foiling. Now this is the way that Simon does it. He likes to use his finger and just rub that on gently. He takes his directly out of the jar and kind of wipes his finger on the edge to get a thin amount. I found I had better luck when I put a little bit onto a work surface and spread it out. You could do that on a piece of recycled plastic if you don't have a glass work surface. Here I have a sponge dauber. That's another way you can apply this product. If you do this way, be sure to be very light-handed because you don't want to go too much into the crevices of the texture. I will say this does seem to put down a little bit of a lighter amount. You can see there's a little lighter amount on that middle area there when you use the dauber, but it does work well. Here I have a Tim Holtz mini ink blending tool. So this has a foam applicator. This works really well too. I'll show you a few ways to use this. Now this foam has some of the Lunar Paste on it that I let dry overnight, and I'm still reusing it. That dried Lunar Paste actually makes it less foamy, I guess, so it's a little more stiff, which works good here. That way it stays just on the raised areas, and that works well too. You can also take a fresh piece of foam, as I've done here. This will have more flex to it, and this will allow you to really put a nice even shimmer over all of the background. So here I'm taking a bit of firmer approach, and so I'm getting into all the nooks and crannies and the background and just creating an overall shine. So you have the options of adding shine over everything or just adding it to the raised areas. And don't worry, I'll be showing more of these different techniques throughout the video. All right, and there is one other way you can apply this that I found works well, and that is using a brayer. I just put some of the paste on my work surface, roll the brayer through it, and then gently roll that over the raised area of our background. You want to start light-handed and then apply a little more pressure until you see that all the raised areas are picking up the paste. I also wanted to remind you that I think a lot of us forget that embossing folders create cool texture on both sides of your cardstock. So in this example, I'm flipping it over and I'm applying the Lunar Paste with a blending tool over the raised areas. In this case, the background is raised because we're using the back side of the panel. This is great for a blending tool or a brayer. Just depends on how much shine you want to add. As for cleanup, it comes off your finger very easily and cleans up off the glass easily as well. All right, let's get started with some cards. For the first couple cards, I'll be using this new Simon Says Stamp Friendly Birds 3D embossing folder. This is what it looks like, just done on regular cardstock, but we're going to add some shine to it. This also comes with 2 bird dies that cut out the birds that this embossing folder creates. I will demonstrate how to use the dies and embossing folders together later in this video. I'm not using the dies today, but do know that it comes with it and that is an option. By the way, I did this embossing folder just like I demonstrated at the beginning of this video. Now I'm taking a bit of the Psych Lunar Paste and putting it on my work surface. You can see you need very little for this. I'm going to use my finger to apply it this time. When I use my finger, I find I get the most shine because it puts the most product down. Now you could go light-handed so that it's only on the raised areas, as you see I'm doing here. But what I like to do is go a little bit heavier with my finger, and that way it gets into the backgrounds also. So you'll have the gold shine on the raised areas, the flat background, but that in between, like the creases and the crevices, those don't catch the Lunar Paste because I'm not pressing that hard. So you kind of get this outline of color showing through that shine. And I just really think that's a great way to use this. Now in Simon's video, which again I have linked, he applies different colors to different raised areas. Sometimes he blends color together. I'm focusing today on mostly creating backgrounds with shine. So I'm pretty much using only one color per background. But do know you can do blending. You can change things up however you want. You can mix colors. I'm just sticking with one. If you find you get too much of the gel or paste into the nooks and crannies, you can wipe it away with a X-Acto knife or a paper piercer, but you want to do that before it dries. Here's a closer look at that result. I tell you, in real life, it is magnificent. It just has a beautiful look to it. Now let's do the same cardstock, but this time I'm using a green paste. So this will be a little more subtle and give you kind of a shimmery metallic shine. So you don't have to go bold by doing like a gold on a colored cardstock. You can go softer like I'm doing here. I'm using mostly dark color cardstocks today because I like that contrast, but you can use lighter colors and the paste on top and get beautiful metallic results. Here's a comparison between the two, same color cardstock, same embossing folder, but on the left I used the gold and on the right I did kind of a tone on tone with the green. And here it is in comparison to the cardstock alone without the shine added. It's fun how it gives it like this antiqued, like old metallic look. So there are the three that we created. Now off screen, I repeated this process. I used the slippery when wet, which is like that gold, on red cardstock. And I really like that one. I think it works really well for the holiday season. And remember, with these backgrounds, I use my finger to apply the paste, and I made sure to get the paste on the raised areas and the background. If you only want on the raised areas, you'll just want to use a lighter touch. All right, let's turn this background into a card. I trimmed it down to 4 by 5¼ inches. On the back, I'm putting an adhesive sheet from Simon Says Stamp. I just find when you have a lot of texture, it's good to use an adhesive sheet to add it to your card. That way you're sure to grab some of the texture on the background and hold it to your card. But you could also use liquid adhesive. I used a brayer to gently press it on, and now I am putting this onto a 4¼ by 5½ inch note card. I love how that white trim just makes the card all like finished looking. It makes it look nice and clean. All right, now I'm using that same adhesive sheet, putting it on the back of a piece of white cardstock, and then I'll flip it over, and from the cardstock side, I'll run this Mary die. This is the Mary ornament die from Simon Says Stamp and CZ Design. After I run that through my die cut machine, I end up with white cardstock with the adhesive already on the back, so it's like a sticker. That is really handy with intricate dies, and I found that this adhesive sheet die cut nicely. I just needed to run it through my machine twice. All right, now I have the solid ornament die included in that die set. I cut that from vellum, and I'm putting my Mary ornament sticker right on top of it. I do like to use a bone folder to really press that down to make sure that that adhesive connects and it holds great. All right, now for a bow on the top of my ornament, I'm using the Hero Arts Holly Berries stamp and die set. So these come together. It has a bunch of great greetings, and then it has the dies you see here. I've been using this bow a lot lately. On the back of my ornament, I'm putting 2 foam squares and then a little liquid adhesive on that. That way I can wiggle it around until I'm happy with the placement and then leave it to dry, and it'll hold very well. I put some liquid adhesive on the back of my white cardstock bow, and there you have this simple card design. I will add a few little pearls here and there just to add a bit more shine. I also chose a shimmery envelope. I'll link to the ones that I like below. I just feel it matches nicely with the background we created. So you can see as you tilt this in the light, you get different looks from it. If you tilt it one way, the background looks darker. If you tilt it another way, it glows a bit more. And you can see how that metallic shine is on the raised areas in the background, but just the little nooks and crannies stand out with that solid color, really defining that texture even more. Before moving on to another variation of this technique, let's create a card using the red with the gold shine. I'm using an amazing new die set from Simon Says Stamp. This is berry stems. Now, I don't know if you remember, but I really loved the berry wreath that they came out with last month, I think it was. I'll link to a video using it up here. Well, this is a similar feel, but you can create little bouquets or a background using these different stems. So it cuts just the right amount of berries, just the right amount of pieces, and all you have to do is glue them together. I really like creating little arrangements like this. I went with traditional holiday colors, but you could do like white or blue berries for something a little different. You could use glitter cardstock or gems if you wanted to. I cut the pieces and I'm arranging them onto a white cardstock rectangle die cut, and then I can glue all of that onto the center of my background. I am covering the birds on these embossing foldered backgrounds, but remember there are dies to cut the birds out if you want to pop it on top of your little bouquet. For a sentiment, I use this really incredible stamp set from Simon Says Stamp and CZ Design called Let It Snow. Now this has some really cool looking layering images. So you can stamp these 3 images together to create Let It Snow, or you can stamp the 3 images on the bottom together to create a little snow globe. It really gives a cool graphic look with very little effort at all. I hope to use it in a video soon. For this card, I just used the Merry Days sentiment and the coordinating die. And I glued a couple extra die cuts behind that sentiment just so it's stronger. It's thicker and it's stronger. That way I can glue it over my background and it won't get crushed in the mail. It will still have that strong dimension to it. So here is the completed card. I did add some gold baubles to some of the berries to finish it off. Now with this example, you can see you can create a really attention-grabbing background with this technique by using a bold, dark color like red, and then using another color of the Lunar Paste on top. In fact, if you use black cardstock and some of the bright like pink and blue Lunar Paste, you can really create something that glows off the charts. But I was going for a holiday look today. Okay, up next is this card that demonstrates 2 different ways to add that glow to your embossing folder backgrounds. For this one, I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp Leafy Green 3D embossing folder and die. They come together, and the die allows you to pop out one of those leaves, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. But first, I have the background that I used the embossing folder on, just as I demonstrated at the beginning of this video. I'm using an ink blending tool and applying a thin layer of fake plant color green Lunar Paste over the entire piece. I'm using a firm hand here so that I can get that shine all over the front of this panel. So it looks like I use like a specialty shimmer cardstock. It's beautiful. And it does enhance that texture the embossing folder created. So last time I just tried to go lightly over the raised areas in background. Here I want the shine everywhere. From the same color of cardstock, I die cut the leaf using the die that comes with the folder. I gave it a mist of water and I'm laying it into the embossing folder where it lines up. It's very easy to line up. In fact, the moisture from the water you mist on it kind of grabs a hold of the embossing folder and stays put. So now I have a die cut leaf with that texture to it. It's gorgeous as is, but I'm using my finger to apply a good amount of the Lunar Paste on top. So this will really shine. Whereas the background, I did a thin layer over everything using an inking tool and spread it out. This time I'm putting it kind of heavy on the raised areas so it will have a lot more glow to it. Same color cardstock, same color Lunar Paste, same embossing folder, but you get a different look. Now to finish off this card was very simple. I added everything to a white note card. I have a white rectangle in the center with our die cut leaf. And then I used the Simon Says Stamp Handwritten Hello die set. I cut the shadow for the word hello from white cardstock. The word hello I cut from Spellbinder's brushed gold cardstock, which matches nicely with the background. I did add a few little berry colored berries here and there just for a pop of color. So there you can see the beautiful shine that we got, starting with just a dark green cardstock, 2 different looks between the background and the die cut in the center. I will say that these embossing folders are part of a new Simon Says Stamp release, and there's a lot of great folders in it. But this one in particular could be used all year round, and it's one that I will recommend and use again in the future. Okay, let's move on to another example and another way to add glow to your embossing folder backgrounds. This time, we're putting the shine on the back side of the panel, and I really like this look. For this, I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp Glistening Snowflake embossing folder and the dies that come with it. I really like this combo. I think there's a lot of ways you can use it, and today's is just one example. I also like that the dies can be used separate from the embossing folder if you want to, or layer them up. Here's what it looks like when you use that embossing folder on navy cardstock. I did it just like I showed you at the beginning of the video. I love that texture. However, we're going to use the back side for this example. So I'm putting some of the blue clear skies down. Now I'm using blue on blue. So this is going to be subtle, like the green on green we did before. If you want higher contrast, choose a different color. I'll show you an example in a moment. I'm using a foam ink applicator to apply a light amount of this over the raised area. And since we're using the back side of the panel, the raised area is the background. I love this look of those set back snowflakes. Now I'm using a foam applicator. You definitely could use your finger for this. The foam applicator will dry and become a little more firm, but I still use it over and over again for this technique. These pastes dry very quickly, so you can set it aside to dry and then use it with another color after that. Now here's an example on the right where I used one of the pink colored Lunar Pastes over the navy. You can see how you can get a different look depending on what color you put on your colored cardstocks. I wanted a subtle look today, so that's why I did the blue on blue, but you could use whatever color you want. Now let's create that snowflake for the center. Here are the different die cuts you can create with those snowflake dies that come with the folder. What I decided to do was cut the solid snowflake shadow from white cardstock. I gave it a little mist with my water bottle, and now I'm lining it up inside of the embossing folder and closing that and running it through my die cut machine. Look at that beautiful texture. You could use it as is or use the other snowflake die that comes with the folder. There I have it cut from silver glitter cardstock, but I decided to instead shake things up and use a smaller snowflake die cut on top of our white piece. That way you could see more of the texture showing through. Also, I love to combine different products together to get different looks. So this is from Memory Box. I cut it from silver glitter cardstock and added it on top. And now I can glue this all right onto our background. By the way, I trimmed it down and added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. For a sentiment, I used the new Simon Says stamp Simply Holiday Greetings stamp set. This one is great because it has a look that goes with any style of card. You can use these inside of a card, on the envelope flap, or on the front of the card as I'm doing. I chose to use the sentiment that says Holiday Hugs, and I white heat embossed it on a blue cardstock strip. I also decorated my envelope using the Simon Says stamp Glistening Snowflake stamp set. This is an amazing set, such beautiful detail, so fine lined, I love it, and there are coordinating dies. Lots you can do with that, but I just used it on the envelope so it matched the card inside. And finally, I added some silver gemstones here and there on the snowflake. So the cool thing about this background is depending on how you tilt it, you get that shine. So tilted one way, it looks like navy. Tilted another way, you get that light blue shine. And that's what's really fun about adding this kind of paste or gel to your projects. All right, so here's a closer look at the snowflake. You can see the texture on that white piece from the embossing folder, the silver glitter cardstock die cut on top, and the silver gemstones. And by the way, I find the Lunar Paste dries pretty quickly and there's no need to set it in any way. It will stay put just fine. And here's a comparison to the embossing folder on just regular cardstock. I love how it gives it a different look. Also, I just wanted to mention this background would be great for applying the paste just to those raised snowflakes on the front. There was a little mock-up that I did there. Just wanted to remind you you could use the front or the back. Next, I'll demonstrate that you can do this technique with 2D embossing folders also. Now, 3D embossing folders are very popular right now. They're the thicker embossing folders that give really deep impressions. 2D embossing folders have been around longer. They're not as thick of a folder, but it still gives beautiful dimension. This is a good example here, one of my favorite embossing folders of all times. It is the Gina K Designs Tapestry folder. This is considered more of a 2D embossing folder. I'm using my finger to lightly apply the paste over the raised areas. By the way, make sure you don't have a lot of paste on your finger. If you do, then it will ooze into the nooks and crannies and you'll lose the definition. You definitely want a light amount on your finger or on your foam applicator as I'm using here. Now, with the foam applicator, this is one that's dried, so it's actually pretty firm. So it will do a good job at applying the paste only on the raised areas. I do recommend whatever technique you use that I shared to try it on some scrap cardstock first to get a feel for how much pressure you need to get a good result. The results here are just beautiful. I really like this magenta color with the gold. It would be wonderful to do red and gold for a holiday background. I'm doing the Simon Says Stamp Peace on Earth die for a sentiment. This has the shadow and the words. And I'm also using the Simon Says Stamp Budding Branches die set. I've cut this from Spellbinder's brushed gold cardstock, which matches nicely with the Lunar Paste we used on the background. I thought it'd be fun to tuck one of these branches into the sentiment, into the swirlies of the sentiment. So I've tucked it there, and I'm going to use a piece of temporary tape to hold it in place. Then I'll flip it all over and put some strong adhesive on the back. I'm using Gina K Connect because this is a glue I trust and it dries clear. I will then place that onto a piece of vellum that I cut using the shadow die for the Peace on Earth. After it dries, I can remove that tape and everything will be connected nicely. Now I thought I'd add a little more to that branch to fill in the bottom of that E, so I cut a few berry pieces off of another die cut and glued it there. Don't be afraid to change up your die cuts however you need to get the look you want. I'm adding some pink little pearls for the berries and then liquid adhesive on the back, only behind the die cut so I can hide that adhesive. I will then place this onto our background and put something heavy on it while it dries. By the way, I did trim my background down to be 4 by 5 1/4 inches and glued it onto a note card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So here is the completed card. Notice that it's a pretty simple design, but it really, really stands out thanks to that glow we added to that texture. By the way, if you're making backgrounds using this technique, it's really easy to do quite a few at a time. You cut all the cardstock, do the embossing folder on the backgrounds, and then apply the Lunar Paste over all the pieces at once. While you have the product out, you might as well do so. And in the time it takes you to create a few backgrounds, the first one will be dry and ready to turn into a card. Before we go, I did want to show you a few more embossing folders that are great for this technique. Here we have the forest floor that I showed you in my demonstration at the beginning of this video. I just really like this with the cute little mushrooms. On this one, I used dark brown cardstock. And then I did the Slippery When Wet gold, just a light application over the whole thing. And look at how that looks like a metal background. Just such a unique look. Here we have this Simon Says Stamp Gingko Leaves 3D embossing folder. Look at the detail in this. I think it's impressive how they can get that detail. This one would be fun in a green and then apply different shades of greens and golds over the different leaves. Remember, you don't have to do a background all the same color. You can do different areas, different colors. That would work well for this floral embossing folder too. Lots of great detail to it. And then finally, something very different. This is a snowy birdhouse embossing folder. Look at the details in that birdhouse. Great for a background, and you can do this technique with it. There are dies that allow you to cut out the different pieces and create a little mini birdhouse scene. All right, there you have a fun way to really make your backgrounds glow using embossing folders. I hope you'll try this. If you're interested in what I used today, I have it linked below in my description. At the end here, I'll link to Simon's video if you're looking for more ideas, and another video where I use Lunar Paste over a stamped image with a stencil. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.